Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. As early as 1964, Israel's Arab enemies started to band together in order to gang upon the Jewish state. Each nation had its interests and designs, but they vowed to unite against a common target. 6 decades later, this united anti-Israel front has been transformed into an Iranian-directed axis. In Lebanon, the Shi'ite Hezbollah, an army more than a militia. In Gaza, 2 Sunni organizations, Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, basically rivals but ready to cooperate in certain contingencies. The 3 are too weak to invade Israel except on limited, made-for-television raids, but their hundreds of thousands of missiles and rockets threaten death and destruction. What are the prospects for such an unholy alliance attacking Israel and triggering harsh retaliation upon the hapless heads of Lebanese and Gazans? Joining us all the way from Israel's northern Galilee region is Major General in Reserve Gershon Cohen, who is an IDF Army Corps commander. Thank you for joining us, General.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
Also joining us here in Jerusalem, as ever, our TV7 editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Oren. Amir, give us a broader understanding on this somewhat threatening scenario, but at the same time also something that we've been hearing a lot about. What has happened in the last several days that brings us to the point of once again discussing this topic?
So, Jonathan, our distinguished guest, Gershon Cohen, is a student of architecture and always finds metaphors in building, engineering, and architecture. And one of the most famous lines in architecture is form follows function. And when the Israeli Defense Forces set up its organizational structure, it has divided the country and the military into 3 territorial commands. Now you can add to them a 4th one, the Home Front Command. And therefore it is the Southern Command, which faces Gaza, in which, as you said, you have Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, while the Northern Command faces Lebanon and Syria, which may or may not combine for a front, or maybe we will have only one of 2 sectors, and the Central Command is facing the West Bank. And therefore one wonders whether the General Staff as a whole, which of course has the Directorate of Military Intelligence and the Air Force, and there is also another smaller command for deep raids into enemy territory behind the rear of the enemy, whether this entire structure is relevant now when we may have a multi-sector war, which would enable but also demand on the General Staff, on the Defense Ministry, on the Cabinet to prioritize, to say what is the most urgent and important front to be dealt with immediately, what can be left for later. Can the population, let's say you start with Lebanon, because Hezbollah is the most dangerous enemy with the most rockets, the biggest arsenal. But if you take most of your Iron Dome batteries to the north, can the population in the south tolerate what is going to happen from Hamas and PIJ? So that is a real life dilemma which generals such as Gershon Cohen always face in planning and then in execution.
Indeed. Well, General Cohen, over a week ago we saw Tehran's top diplomat, the Iranian Foreign Minister Hossein Amir Abdullahian, travel to Damascus, meet up with his counterpart, and then during that particular meeting, he, of course, also highlighted that Iran will not stand idly by while Israel strikes Syrian targets, of course, omitting the fact that it is Iranian targets in Syria. But that's besides the point. From there, he continued to travel to Beirut, met up in a bunker in an undisclosed location with the Iranian proxy Secretary General of Hezbollah, of course, Hassan Nasrallah. They had a lengthy meeting there, according to various reports, however, the contents of which have not been made public to the general public, of course, whether or not intelligence agencies have gained intelligence on the concrete discussion is a different matter. But I'd like to hear your perspective on a meeting that ensued after that. And that is, again, Hassan Nasrallah of Hezbollah, the deputy head of the political bureau of Hamas, Saleh al-Arouri, and the leader of Palestinian Islamic Jihad, all meeting in Beirut, discussing particulars, and then making a public appearance via a photo op and highlighting their intention of collaborating in the event of any conflagration vis-a-vis Israel. How do you see this as an Israeli general who's still active in reserve, and at the same time, is Israel preparing accordingly to contend both with the southern command issues of the Hamas-controlled Gaza Strip, as Mr. Oren just mentioned, as well as the northern front, dealing with one contingent of both Lebanon and Syria, where, of course, Shi'ite militias are also present and entrenched at the behest of the Islamic Republic of Iran?
Actually, just before, Amir Oren described very accurately the new challenge, and actually IDF and the Israeli state really challenged in a way that we have not been challenged before. And just regarding the meeting in Beirut, of course, the content is very, very important. We are not really informed about the whole details of the content, but the very existence of that meeting is a declaration. It has a message. It's delivering us a message, and the message is that they are united and they are aware about a new phase in the struggle against Israel. Actually, Israel, the chief of staff even and defense minister, not yet recognize that we are facing a new era and a new idea of warfare due to 4 dimensions that really taking a change. The first dimension is a purpose. The main purpose that uniting them now is that they are realizing an opportunity to attack Israel, basically in Judea and Samaria, in the same way as Israel had been attacked in Gaza Strip since 1994 by Hamas, and in Lebanese strike in which IDF employed until 2000. So what is the idea? That due to guerrilla warfare, we will find a way out, a necessity to withdraw, and this is the opportunity. This is first dimension. The second dimension is the weapons. They are really equipped today, not just with more weapons, but also with new quality of weapons. The third dimension is organization. They are really organized in a better way, including Jenin, for example. In this city, they have a control and command rooms to really control the fighting. It means IDF is not anymore fighting against molecular of terrorists. It is a well-organized battlefield. And the last dimension is the spirit. There is really a new spirit that guided them, and this spirit, in part, maybe coming from winds of war from Ukraine, and also, and I think this is more important, it is coming from an awareness of era of opportunity. As believer of heaven. They are really expecting and trying to find indication for the expectations that their hour is really arriving. And now they are believing that their real hour to demolish Israel is really, really coming.
Very interesting indeed. Well, let's start with this sector that General Hakohen just mentioned, Judea, Samaria, the Jordan Valley. Since not last March, but the March before that, following a series of deadly terror attacks that plagued Israel, the then government under the prime minister at the time, Bennett, came out and declared Operation Wastebreaker. This operation sought to root out terror elements throughout these territories at a time when the defense establishment here in Israel comprehended the necessity to deal with Iranian cells all over the territories which the Islamic Republic sought to utilize during a multi-sector war against Israel. These operations have been successful. We see to date dozens being arrested on a daily basis, and something that, of course, causes more strain on Israel's prison authorities, and Israel is allocating a lot of resources, both human resources, security operators, special operators, as well as finance that could have been utilized against the Islamic Republic, a reality which Tehran views as very comfortable from its perspective. But nonetheless, the situation is all the time below the spark of a full-out operation, something that the government right now with the domestic issues, again, Iran recognizing that as well, cannot really launch a full-scale operation in Judea and Samaria because it does not have the backing to do so. Is this scenario right now in such a precarious point in time that such an operation should be reconsidered?
The military in Israel, as in all other countries, has a very distinct shape and form. There are companies, battalions, brigades, divisions. You have the Air Force, you have the Internal Security Agency, Shabak. They are all organized according to some structure. The enemy, on the other hand, especially in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, is shapeless. You have more than 2 million Palestinians. If you, as a population, if you only have 1% of them willing and able to take part in terrorism, you have 20,000 targets to deal with. If it's 1/10 of that, it is still 2,000 Palestinians who may any day decide to stop being regular faceless citizens and commit some terror act, which they are well aware of will be their last act on earth. And apparently they are not deterred. Perhaps others are deterred. Israel goes through the motions of destroying their families' homes, and perhaps others did not join this terror activity because they didn't want their families to suffer. But there are enough terrorists to commit it, even though the heads are separated from the hands or the fingers. That is to say, the terrorists are in Jenin or in Hebron, but the heads are in Gaza or perhaps in Beirut. And yes, so therefore, when Israel wants to hit the brain, the nerve center, it cannot do so in the West Bank, and it must consider whether retaliating against Yahya Sinwar or Mohammed Def or any of their colleagues in Gaza, or Salah el-Aruri and Hassan Nasrallah in Lebanon, whether that will cause an escalation, not when Israel initiates it at a time and circumstance which it chooses, but actually it is doing the other side's bidding. And therefore it is very difficult, and you must consider the domestic problem, which a national leadership and the military leadership have when they don't respond when they always say, yes, but do you know how many terror acts did we foil? Hundreds of them. But it is immaterial, because if you have 99% success and 1% failure, it is only the 1% which counts.
Indeed. Well, before we head to the most crucial sector, and that's the northern sector, I'd like to hear, of course, also your reaction, General, about the broader area of Judea, Samaria, and the Jordan Valley, because there are various complexities in each territory. You highlighted, of course, the northern Samaria region, particularly Jenin and Nablus, which are really terror-infested territories with clans that have been known to be very hostile in general terms and very lagging behind, and also very challenging for the Palestinian Authority, which has not managed to maintain its powers in those territories for quite some time now. But when we look at the Gaza Strip, the Islamist Hamas organization is also in tune with the situation here in Israel. And while it is consulting with Hezbollah and with Palestinian Islamic Jihad, it understands that contrary to Lebanon, for instance, where if Israel strikes at Hezbollah and possibly removes Hezbollah from the equation, it could deliver Lebanon to the Lebanese people, and there are plenty of other opportunities at hand. However, when we're talking about the Gaza Strip, there is no replacement for the Islamist Hamas at this stage, since the other options may be even more radical than Hamas, and to see Fatah return to power there is not truly feasible at this stage, at least not to various assessments. How can Israel contend with such a reality?
Actually, you and Amir described a situation that could explain what are the conditions that created the operational embarrassment to the IDF and to the whole security services, and even to the political leadership of Israel. Actually, the embarrassment created by a catch that it is either or, whatever we will do is not recommended. In a situation like that, we must just penetrate to a new form of action, and this has not been invented by IDF. For example, Jenin in itself is a challenge. Israel and IDF are still prevented from coming to take back Jenin, even for a while, and to say we are here in order to stay even for a while, for months, 2 months, 3 months, and we can manage the city, take responsibility. And it is not that we cannot afford ourselves to do that physically. The IDF really can do that. But regarding the specific focus of all international community about what has been created with the Palestinian Authority and their anxiety, whether Israel going to destroy this very necessary part and factor upon which they are hoping to build a new road to peace and stability. So actually, the prime minister is really prevented from that, and everyone going back 20 years ago to the operation in 2002, Sharon was captured with the same embarrassment, and without the leadership of Sharon, we wouldn't never come to that huge operation. It means that it is not the IDF now that must come with an operational idea. It is a political leadership that must create a kind of conviction about a form of action that found to be necessary.
And is this... Go ahead.
I don't think that Israeli government could really find inner legitimation to do that. Even the last operation in Jenin that taking place no more than 2 days, part of the protesters in Israel accused chief of staff that he went to an operation in order to serve the political interest of the Prime Minister Netanyahu. Actually, it was exactly the opposite. It was the initiation of the Central Commander Yehuda Fuchs and Herzi Halevi, the Chief of Staff, and they waited to get green light for that operation. It was not easy. So the awareness of the IDF about the constraints that captured the hands of the Israeli government today are really part of the huge embarrassment, and I wish we will find a way to get free from that.
Let me add something in that regard and show how a minor point, and definitely it would have been minor years ago, can become a major one. We all heard in the 1990s the term that Marine General Krulak coined, the strategic corporal. That is one guy, a very low-ranking soldier who can, by virtue of shooting someone, doing something, cause a strategic event. Now there are strategic green card holders and American passport holders in the West Bank. It turns out, and we found out about it.
And Gaza, for that matter.
And Gaza. Mm. And we found out about it in the dispute regarding Israelis wishing to be relieved of visa obligations when they go to the States, and the reciprocity the United States expects from Israel. It turns out that there are so many Palestinians of American citizenship that Israel must be cautious when it goes into Jenin not to incidentally hit one of them, because there will be an international scandal. So it's a minor point, but it only shows you the difficulty in planning operations such as the one General Cohen mentioned, Defensive Shield, 21 years ago, when huge forces, armored, mechanized infantry, go into a very dense urban area.
And shows also how immigration can be utilized,
of course,
particularly for strategic interests of one country or another. And this hybrid immigration is, of course, utilized for the interests of various factors. But let's move to the northern sector, because we do not have very much time left. And I'd like to ask you, General Cohen, considering the fact that we do understand quite clearly, several days ago, we had also UNIFIL renew its mandate with limited constraints, but still enough leeway to be able to monitor the southern Lebanese territories in case of additional Hezbollah activity, even though Hezbollah continues to do exactly what it wants and is managing, quite frankly, to do so with limited exposure. But at the same time, if we look at Syria, we see growing, and I happen to have here a map with different military placements. There are over 500 different military outposts and different installations belonging to the Islamic Republic of Iran in Syria today, with many of those posts being not far from the Lebanon with Israel. So to what degree do you see, in the event that we do have a multi-sector war, the Islamic Republic of Iran drawn into such an event, even though it, of course, is keen on doing so at a time and place of its own choosing, rather than being dragged into such an event?
Actually, the vision of Iranian was to build another front equal to Hezbollah from the Syrian border. Due to the permanent effort guided by Gadi Eisenkot of staff and Aviv Kochavi, this was successfully prevented. They are still there in Syria, but they are not well organized close to the front and not yet became a threat. It means that the main equilibrium of anxiety and deterrence between Israel and Hamas is mainly taking place in the border of Israel and Lebanon, not in Syria. It happened to be that if Hezbollah sending a terrorist from the border of Syria, it is beyond the constraints that really ruling the game in Lebanese border. It means Israel IDF would kill him and no retaliation by Hezbollah. Not the same in everything taking place in the Lebanese border. It means that it is very calculated game. Actually, Hezbollah, guided by Nasrallah, trying to exploit the whole threat that they can really going to touch the possibility of gliding to a war and yet don't want a war, but succeeding to exploit the fact that they can just take the risk to go so close, taking the risk to fall down to the war, and yet believing that they will not really fail to the war because they are trusting the Israeli well-calculated practical reasoning not to just find ourselves in a war.
Well, unfortunately, this is all the time that we have for today. I'd like to thank General Cohen, who will be joining me very soon also for an editor's note. It's just in a couple of days, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm looking forward to that. Thank you, General. I'd like also to thank our TV7 editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Oren, and all of you at home as well. Until next time, from here in Jerusalem, Shalom. For more of TV7's productions and editorials, we invite you to visit our website at tv7israelnews.com.